The moment my own daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, just apologize so we can all move on," I felt something inside me go quiet. Not angry quiet, not sad quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a man decides he is done. I stood in the middle of a backyard I had never been welcome in, surrounded by people who had spent 3 days making sure I knew it, and I smiled. I smiled because I had already made my decision. I just had not told anyone yet. That part came later. And when it did, nobody in that family ever looked at me the same way again. To understand how I ended up standing in that backyard with a suitcase in my hand and a one-way ticket on my phone, I need to take you back about 4 months. Back to when things were still quiet. Back to when I believed my daughter and I were still on the same side. My name is Arthur Callahan. I am 67 years old. I live in a small town called Barton Mills, just outside of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Population barely 3,000 on a good day. I have lived here for over 40 years. I drive a 1994 Ford pickup that I have rebuilt twice with my own hands. I have a yellow Labrador named Biscuit who follows me everywhere. Every morning, I eat 2 eggs over easy with sourdough toast and black coffee, so strong it could wake the dead. I sit at the same booth at the Riverside Diner and watch the fog lift off the river. I fix things for my neighbors, leaky faucets, broken fence posts. I never charge. Most people in Barton Mills know me as a retired handyman who keeps to himself and has never once raised his voice in public. What they do not know, what almost nobody knows, is that before I moved here, I spent 26 years as a structural engineer for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. I oversaw bridge construction in 3 countries. I held a security clearance that most people cannot even pronounce. I was once personally commended by a brigadier general for identifying a flaw in a dam design that would have flooded a village of 900 people. But I do not talk about that. My wife, Helen, used to say I buried my accomplishments the way other men bury their mistakes, deep and quiet and without ceremony. Helen. If you want to understand anything about this story, you need to understand Helen first. She was the compass I steered by. Smarter than me in every way that mattered. She could read a room the way I could read a blueprint, with precision, with instinct, with a patience I never learned to match. She had a saying. She said it so often it became the rhythm of our household. "Arthur, you cannot build anything worth keeping on a foundation that does not respect you." She said it about friendships. She said it about work. She said it about family. And she was right every single time. Helen died 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer that started quiet and ended loud. 7 months from diagnosis to the last breath she took in our bedroom with the window open because she wanted to hear the birds. I held her hand. Her fingers were cold, but she squeezed once. Just once. After she passed, the house became a museum of 2. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her apron on the hook by the stove. I made coffee every morning and set out 2 cups for almost a year before I stopped. Some nights I still reach across the bed. The empty side is always cold. Our daughter, Sophie, was the one thread that kept me stitched to the world. She was everything Helen and I had hoped for and more. Kind, whip-smart, stubborn in the best possible way. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's ability to see through nonsense. She had graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in education. She taught 4th grade at a school in Des Moines. She loved those kids like they were her own. And then she met Marcus Webb, 36 years old, regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company. Drove a black SUV that cost more than my house, smiled like a man who practiced in mirrors. When Sophie first brought him home for Sunday dinner, I wanted to like him. I watched the way he pulled out her chair, the way he asked about my truck with what seemed like genuine curiosity. He shook my hand firm. He called me sir. Something in my chest wanted to believe. Helen had been gone 8 years by then. Sophie had been through 2 relationships that ended quietly. I wanted her to have someone solid. So I tried. I invited Marcus fishing. He came once, caught nothing, checked his phone 14 times, and told me the lake smelled like mud. I let it go. I invited him to the diner for breakfast. He looked at my sourdough and eggs and said, "No offense, Arthur, but that plate is a heart attack waiting to happen." He laughed. I did not. but I let that go too because Sophie was smiling again. And when your daughter smiles after years of not smiling, you will forgive a man almost anything. Almost. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, I hope you will stay with me through the rest of it. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this one keep reaching the people who need to hear them. The first time I felt something shift was at Sophie's birthday dinner. She turned 31. A steakhouse in Des Moines with leather booths and candles. Marcus had organized it. I drove 2 hours to be there. When I arrived, Marcus shook my hand and said, "Arthur, glad you could make it. We saved you a seat at the end." The far end, next to a man named Greg who sold insurance and talked about nothing else. Sophie was at the other end next to Marcus. I watched her. She looked happy, but her happiness had a thinness to it, like paint over rust. During dessert, Marcus made a toast. He talked about Sophie like she was a product he was proud to represent. "This woman right here," he said, holding up his glass, "is the reason I get up every morning." Well, her and my quarterly bonus. Everyone laughed. Sophie smiled, but her fingers tightened around her napkin under the table. I saw it because I was watching. I am always watching. That is what quiet men do. When a man treats your daughter like an accessory to his success, the meal tastes wrong no matter how expensive the dinner is. I drove home in the dark with the radio off and Biscuit on the passenger seat, and I heard Helen's voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside me. You cannot build anything worth keeping on a foundation that does not respect you. The second moment came 2 months later. Sophie drove up to Barton Mills for the weekend. She came alone. We spent Saturday the way we always did. Coffee on the porch, a walk along the river with Biscuit, lunch at the diner. That afternoon we sat on the porch and Sophie talked about Marcus's family, the Webbs. They were from a suburb of Minneapolis. Father was a retired corporate attorney. Mother ran a charity board, 2 brothers, both in finance. They are having their family reunion next month, Sophie said. Marcus wants you to come. Something in her voice sounded like a question wearing the clothes of a statement. "Me?" I said. "At the Webb's family reunion?" It would mean a lot to Marcus. "He wants you to meet everyone properly." I looked at her. She was pulling at a thread on her sleeve. "Sophie," I said carefully, "do you want me to come?" She paused 1 beat too long. "Of course I do, Dad." I did not believe her. Not because she was lying, but because I do not think she knew the truth herself. But I said yes. Because she asked, because she was my daughter, because after Helen died, saying no to Sophie felt like closing a door I could not afford to close. I should have said no. I know that now, but knowing something afterward is not the same as knowing it before. The third moment happened the week before the reunion. Sophie called on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was different, tighter, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "Dad, I just want to go over a few things before the reunion." "Go over what?" "Just, Marcus's family is a little more formal. They dress up for dinner. They do not really talk about, small town stuff. Just maybe do not bring up the handyman work or the truck or, She trailed off. I sat in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, and I listened to my daughter ask me to be less of myself so that I would fit into a family that had never met me. My jaw tightened, my hand pressed flat against the table. I could feel the grain of the wood under my palm. "Sophie," I said, "I will be myself. That is the only version of me I know how to be." "I know, Dad. She stopped. "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart." I hung up. I sat at that table for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. Biscuit put his head on my knee. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwood trees with a sound like whispered conversation. None of us knew what the next 3 weeks would bring. I should have known. The signs were all there. I just was not ready to read them yet. The fourth moment, the one that planted the seed for everything that followed. I arrived at the Webb family reunion on a Friday afternoon in late July. It was held at a lake house in northern Minnesota. Big property, stone facade, a dock stretching out over water so still it looked like poured glass. There were about 35 people there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, children running across the lawn with sparklers left over from the 4th. Marcus met me at the car. He shook my hand and said, "Arthur, welcome. So glad you made it." His smile was wide, but it did not quite reach his voice. Sophie appeared behind him. She hugged me, and I felt how thin she had gotten. My arms went all the way around her with room to spare. Something cold moved through my chest. "You look beautiful," I said. "Thanks, Dad." She pulled away quickly, too quickly. She glanced at Marcus. He was already walking toward the house. That glance. I filed it away the way I used to file structural reports, carefully, without comment, for later review. Marcus introduced me to his parents. His father, Charles, was tall, silver-haired, and had the handshake of a man who measured people by their net worth. His mother, Eleanor, smiled the way people smile at furniture they did not pick out. Pleasant, brief, already looking past me. "Arthur, is it?" Charles said. "Sophie's father." "That is right. And you are from, where was it? One of those little towns in Iowa." "Barton Mills." "Charming," Eleanor said in a voice that made charming sound like a diagnosis. I had not been in that house 15 minutes, and I already knew exactly where I stood. Outside, firmly, deliberately, politely outside. Some people build walls out of brick, others build them out of manners. The result is the same. You are on the wrong side either way. Friday evening dinner was the first real test. Long table, white tablecloth, candles, wine glasses that weighed more than my coffee mug at home. Everyone sat in what appeared to be assigned positions. Marcus was at the center, next to his father. Sophie was beside Marcus. I was placed at the far end between Marcus's cousin Oliver, who worked in venture capital and spoke exclusively in acronyms, and an elderly aunt named Margaret, who was pleasant but nearly deaf. During the first course, Charles asked Marcus about his sales numbers. Marcus talked for 8 minutes straight. I counted. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked bored. It was a performance, and the family was the audience, trained and willing. When there was a lull, I made the mistake of speaking. "This is a beautiful property, Charles," I said. "How long has it been in the family?" Charles looked at me like I had spoken out of turn. 3 generations, he said. Then he turned back to Marcus. Oliver leaned over. "Do not take it personally," he whispered. "He does that to everyone who is not a Webb." I appreciated the honesty. I did not appreciate the implication that it was normal. Saturday was worse. I woke early because that is what I do. I walked to the kitchen to make coffee. Eleanor was already there. She looked at me like I had broken into her home. "Oh, Arthur, you were up early." "Old habit," I said. "Mind if I make some coffee?" She gestured vaguely at the machine, a chrome contraption with more buttons than my truck dashboard. I figured it out, poured a cup, sat on the back porch and watched the mist rise off the lake. For 10 minutes, it was peaceful. Then Marcus's brother, David, appeared. He was 33, worked at an investment firm, and had the energy of someone who had never been told no. "Morning, Arthur," he said. "Marcus tells me you are a handyman? Retired engineer, actually?" Right. But you fix things now, like around the neighborhood." "I help my neighbors, yes." He nodded slowly, took a sip of his coffee. "That is sweet," he said. The word sweet landed like a pat on the head. Condescending, wrapped in politeness so thin you could see through it. A man who reduces another man's life to something sweet has never built anything with his hands. I said nothing. I drank my coffee. But I remembered. Saturday afternoon, the family gathered for a group photograph by the lake. Eleanor organized everyone with military precision. She placed each person with a tap on the shoulder. She placed Marcus. She placed Sophie right next to him. She placed David. She placed Oliver. She did not place me. I stood to the side and waited. Sophie saw me. Her eyes flickered. She opened her mouth and then closed it. "Excuse me," I said to Eleanor. "Where would you like me?" She turned. "Oh, Arthur, why do not you stand over there on the left, just at the edge?" The edge, where I could be cropped out later without anyone noticing. I stood where she pointed. I smiled for the camera, and something inside me became perfectly still. Before I go on, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you are watching from. I read every single one, and knowing you are out there, that you are listening, that these stories matter to someone, that is what keeps me going. So tell me where you are. I want to know. Saturday evening was the breaking point. Dinner again, same long table, same performance. Charles was telling a story about a deal he had closed in 1989. Everyone laughed at the right moments. I sat in my assigned seat at the edge and ate quietly. Then Marcus stood up. He tapped his glass. "I want to say something," he said. The table went silent. He looked at Sophie. "This woman," he said, "gave up a lot to be part of this family. She moved cities. She changed jobs. She left behind her simpler life to build something bigger with me." He said simpler like it was a kindness, like he was being generous by not saying what he really meant. I looked at Sophie. She was smiling, but her hands were in her lap, and her fingers were twisted together so tight her knuckles had gone white. "And I think," Marcus continued, "that speaks to her character. She saw what this family represents: excellence, ambition, legacy, and she chose to be part of it." He raised his glass. To Sophie, everyone drank. I did not. I stared at my glass, and I heard Helen's voice so clearly it nearly knocked the wind out of me. "You cannot build anything worth keeping on a foundation that does not respect you." My daughter had not been welcomed into this family. She had been absorbed. There is a difference. One honors who you are, the other erases it. After dinner, I found Sophie alone on the dock. She was sitting with her feet hanging over the water. The moon was low, and the lake was black. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. I sat beside her. "You okay?" "I am fine, Dad." "Sophie." "What? That toast?" "What about it? He talked about you like you were a renovation project, like he fixed you up." She pulled her feet out of the water. Her jaw tightened. "He did not mean it like that." "How did he mean it?" "Dad, please. Not here. Not this weekend. Just, please." I looked at her profile in the moonlight. My daughter, my only child, Helen's girl, and I saw it. The flinch, the way she braced herself against even the possibility of conflict, the way she had learned to make herself smaller so the room would not notice her. Something cracked inside my chest. Not loud, not dramatic, just a hairline fracture in the last wall I had built to keep my patience intact. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I went to my room. I sat on the bed. The sheets smelled like lavender detergent, expensive and unfamiliar. I stared at the ceiling and I made no decisions. Not yet. Decisions made in anger are bridges built in storms. They do not hold. I would wait. Sunday morning, the last morning, the morning that changed everything. It started with a conversation I was not supposed to hear. I was walking back from the dock early before anyone else was up. The kitchen window was open. I heard Eleanor's voice, clear and sharp as a bell in the still morning air. "I do not understand why he is still here, Charles. He does not belong. He sits there like a lost dog at a dinner party." Charles's voice, lower, measured. "Marcus says Sophie insists." "Sophie insists because she feels guilty. The man is a handyman from a town nobody has heard of. He wears flannel shirts to dinner. He does not know which fork to use. He is embarrassing." "Eleanor, I am saying what everyone is thinking. Marcus's career is at a critical point. The partners at his firm are watching. They will be at the engagement party. We cannot have that sitting at the table." That. She called me that. Not Arthur. Not Sophie's father. That. I stood outside that window and I listened, and my hands did not shake. My voice did not crack. My eyes did not water. Something much deeper happened. Something settled. The way a foundation settles when it finally accepts the weight it was built to carry. I walked back to the dock. I sat on the wooden planks. I watched the sun come up over the pine trees. And I thought about Helen. I thought about her hands. I thought about the way she used to rest her palm on my chest when I was upset and say, "Arthur, you cannot build anything worth keeping on a foundation that does not respect you." 3 times she had been right. 3 times I had needed to hear it. And now I heard it for the 3rd time, sitting on a stranger's dock in Minnesota, and I knew what I had to do. I did not act immediately. That is not how I operate. I went back to my room. I opened my suitcase. Inside, folded beneath my clothes, was a photograph. Helen and me on our wedding day. She was laughing. I was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. I held that photograph for a long time. I thought about the bridges I had built. Real ones. Steel and concrete and precision. Bridges that held weight because every calculation was exact. Every measurement was true. You cannot force a bridge to stand on a foundation that is wrong. You cannot force a family to respect a man they have already decided is beneath them. And you should not force your daughter to choose between her father and the life she has built, even if that life is built on sand. But you can choose yourself. You can stand up. You can walk out. You can buy a one-way ticket and never look back. I called the airline from my room. There was a flight from Minneapolis to Cedar Rapids leaving at 4:15 that afternoon. One way. I booked it. I packed my bag slowly, the way I used to pack for deployments. Every item folded, no wasted movement. Then I walked outside. The family was gathering for brunch. Sunday brunch on the patio. Eleanor had set the table with fresh flowers, white roses. Charles was reading the newspaper. Marcus was pouring orange juice and telling David about a new account he had landed. Sophie was helping Eleanor carry plates from the kitchen. I set my bag down by the front door and walked onto the patio. "I want to thank you all for having me this weekend," I said. The table went quiet, not the comfortable quiet of a natural pause. The sharp quiet of a room that senses something is about to change. "Arthur," Charles said, folding his paper, "you are leaving?" "I am." Marcus looked at Sophie. Sophie looked at me. Her eyes widened. "Dad, what is going on?" "I am going home, Sophie. But we are having brunch. We were going to do the boat ride this afternoon. You cannot just." "Sophie." I kept my voice level, calm. The voice I used when I had to deliver structural reports that carried bad news. "I overheard a conversation this morning." The patio went colder than the morning air. Eleanor's hand stopped midway between the table and a pitcher. "Your mother-in-law called me that," I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "She called me embarrassing. She said I do not belong here. She said I am a problem that needs to be managed before the engagement party so I do not humiliate this family in front of Marcus's partners." Eleanor's face went pale. Charles set down his newspaper. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at his mother with an expression I could not quite read. "Arthur," Eleanor said carefully, "I think you may have misunderstood the context of a private." "There was no misunderstanding," I said. "The window was open, your words were clear, and they were not the first. This entire weekend I have been placed at the edge of every table, excluded from every photograph, spoken to like a visitor who overstayed his welcome, and I have said nothing. Because my daughter asked me to be here, and I love my daughter more than I love my own comfort." The table was silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. "But I will not apologize for who I am," I said. "I will not apologize for the town I live in or the truck I drive or the work I do with my hands. I built bridges for 26 years, real ones, the kind that hold weight, the kind that keep people alive. I was a structural engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers. I held clearances that most of the people at this table could not qualify for. I was commended by generals. I built infrastructure in 3 countries. And when I retired, I chose to live quietly because I had earned the right to live however I wanted." Nobody spoke. David's coffee cup was halfway to his mouth. It stayed there. Oliver was staring at me with an expression I recognized from my years in the service. It was the expression of a man who had just realized he had badly miscalculated. "I did not come here to prove myself to anyone," I said. "I came because my daughter asked, and that should have been enough." I looked at Sophie. She had tears running down her face. Silent tears, the kind that come from a place so deep they do not make a sound. "Sophie, I love you, but I will not stand in a room that does not respect me and pretend that it does. Your mother taught me that." Marcus cleared his throat. He stood up slowly. "Arthur," he said, "I had no idea my mother said those things. I want you to know that I—" He stopped. His voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to tell me it was real. "I should have paid more attention," he said. "I should have noticed how you were being treated. I was so focused on making everything perfect for the family, I did not see what was happening right in front of me." He turned to Eleanor. "Mom, that was wrong. What you said was wrong." Eleanor opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands trembled on the edge of the table. She looked at Charles. Charles looked at the newspaper. He was no longer reading. "Arthur is Sophie's father," Marcus said. His voice was quiet now, stripped. He raised her. He shaped her into the person I fell in love with. And if this family cannot respect the man who made that possible, then this family has a problem that has nothing to do with flannel shirts or forks. The patio was silent. Eleanor's eyes were wet. She looked at me for the first time the entire weekend as if she were actually seeing me. She started. "I am sorry, Arthur. It was barely a whisper. I looked at her. I studied her face the way I used to study blueprints, looking for cracks, looking for truth. I appreciate that, Eleanor, I said, but an apology does not erase a foundation. It only shows you where the cracks are. I picked up my bag. Sophie stepped forward. Dad, please, do not go. We can fix this. We can. Sophie, I put my hand on her cheek. Her skin was warm and damp. I am not leaving you. I am leaving a place that does not have room for me. There is a difference. But the ticket, you already. One way, sweetheart, because I do not need a return trip to a place that was never home. She pressed her face into my chest and cried. I held her. I smelled her shampoo, vanilla, and something clean. And for a moment, I was holding her as a baby again, 4 pounds and 11 ounces, screaming at the world with Helen laughing beside me. Come visit me, I whispered. Come home whenever you need to. The porch is always open. Biscuit misses you. She laughed through her tears, a small, broken, beautiful sound. I kissed the top of her head. Then I walked to my truck. I did not look back, not because I did not care, because I had already seen everything I needed to see. The drive to the airport took 47 minutes. The road was lined with pine trees and the air smelled like warm bark. I drove with the window down, the radio off, just me and the highway, and the sound of a man finally breathing after 3 days. I sat at the gate with a cup of terrible coffee and a silence so deep it felt like a blanket. My phone buzzed once. Sophie. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry I asked you to be less. I read it twice. Then I typed back, you never have to be less either, sweetheart. That's the whole point. The weeks that followed were quiet, the good kind of quiet, the kind that comes after a storm passes and the air smells like washed earth. I went back to my routine, eggs and toast, coffee at the diner, biscuit at my feet, fence posts and leaky faucets, and the slow, honest rhythm of a life I had chosen. 3 weeks after the reunion, Sophie called. Dad, I need to tell you something. My hand tightened on the phone. Marcus and I had a long conversation about his family, about how they treated you, about how I let them. I waited. I told him that if his family cannot respect you, I cannot build a life with people who would erase where I came from. And what did he say? He said he agreed. He said he had already talked to his mother, twice. He said she cried both times. He said he told her that if she could not find a way to genuinely welcome you, he would not bring Sophie around anymore. My throat tightened. He said that? He did, Dad, and I believe him. I think he means it. I sat on my porch and thought about Marcus standing up at that brunch table. The crack in his voice, the first real thing I had heard him say in 2 years of knowing him. Maybe I had been wrong about him. Not completely, but enough. Sometimes people are not bad. They are just asleep, and it takes something loud to wake them up. 5 weeks later, Marcus drove to Barton Mills, alone. He pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. Biscuit barked once, then wagged his tail. Dogs know things. Arthur, Marcus said. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps like a man standing before a judge. I owe you more than an apology. Sit down, I said. I pointed to the chair beside me. Helen's chair. He sat. I poured him coffee. He drank it without complaint. I grew up in a family that measured everything, he said. Success, status, worth. I never questioned it. And when I met Sophie, I tried to fit her into that system instead of questioning the system itself. He stared at the mug. What you said at brunch about foundations, it stayed with me. My wife used to say something similar. Sophie told me. She told me a lot about Helen. I think Helen would have seen right through me on day one. I almost smiled. She would have. I want to do better, Arthur. I do not want to be a man who lets his mother call someone that and says nothing. I looked at his hands wrapped around the mug. No watch this time. His eyes were tired and honest. Then do better, I said. That is all anyone can do. We sat on that porch for 2 hours. 2 men, a dog, coffee, the sound of wind in the cottonwoods, and the slow beginning of something that might, with time, become real. 2 months later, Sophie came home for a weekend. She brought Marcus. I made breakfast, eggs and toast and coffee on the porch. Biscuit put his head on Sophie's lap, and she fed him bacon she thought I did not see. We did not talk about the reunion. We talked about the river and whether Biscuit was getting fat or just fluffy. Sophie said, fluffy. I said fat. Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from the stomach. That afternoon, Sophie and I walked along the river. Biscuit ran ahead, chasing something only he could see. Dad, she said, I am sorry I asked you to apologize. You did not ask me to apologize. I asked you to be less. That is worse. I put my arm around her. She leaned into me the way she used to when she was small, when I was the tallest thing in her world and nothing could reach her. You do not owe me an apology, Sophie. You owe yourself a promise. What promise? That you will never again make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. She was quiet for a long time. The river moved past us, slow and patient and indifferent to our problems. Mom would have said it better, she said. Your mother would have said the same thing. She just would have said it louder. Sophie laughed, and in that laugh I heard Helen, clear as morning, bright as light on water. When I was young, I believed strength was about endurance, about standing still while the world hit you and never flinching. The Army taught me that strength was about precision, about knowing exactly where to place the weight so the structure holds. But it took me 67 years to learn the real truth. Strength is knowing when to leave. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is a man packing a bag with steady hands. It is a one-way ticket booked without anger. It is the quiet, unshakable knowledge that your worth was never determined by the people who failed to see it. Helen knew that. She always did. And now, finally, sitting on my porch with my dog and my coffee and the ghost of my wife smiling somewhere just out of sight, I know it too. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone who loved you quietly or someone who made you feel small when you deserve to feel whole, I hope you will share it. Send it to the person who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And leave me a comment. Tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Tell me what you would have done in that backyard. Sometimes the people who need these words the most find them because someone like you decided to pass them along. And that, my friend, is how bridges are really built. Not with steel, not with concrete, with the decision to reach across and say, you are not alone.